You've been lied to. Not by a stranger, not by an enemy, by the very frameworks you trust to tell you the truth about the world. Think about the last time someone asked you whether you believe in God. Think about the speed of your answer, the confidence in your voice, the way you didn't even pause. Because somewhere along the line, someone handed you a conclusion and told you to wear it like an identity. You did, and you've been wearing it ever since without ever once checking whether it actually fits. Now consider this. One of the most brilliant human minds ever to walk this earth, a man who dismantled the atom, decoded the behavior of light, exposed the failure of an entire space agency with a single rubber ring, was asked the same question. And his answer did not sound like yours. His answer did not sound like anyone's, because his answer cost him something. It cost him the comfort of belonging to a side. It cost him the applause of a crowd. And he paid that cost without flinching, without apology, and without the slightest interest in making you feel better about where you stand. That answer is what this is about. But before you get to it, you need to understand something about yourself first. You are living inside a war you didn't choose to join. On one side, you have religion, ancient, layered, emotionally powerful, socially binding, and offering something human beings are desperate for, a story that makes suffering meaningful. On the other side, you have secular rationalism, sharp, empirical, technically powerful, and offering something equally seductive, the feeling that you are smarter than the people who still need that story. Both sides want you. Both sides are recruiting. And both sides, in their worst versions, are selling you certainty you haven't earned. The man at the center of this conversation refused both recruiters. He looked at the universe, the actual universe, not the one dressed up in either theology or ideology. And he said something that takes more courage than most people will ever summon in a lifetime. He said, "I don't know." Not as a weakness, not as a retreat, as the single most honest thing a thinking person can say when standing in front of a question this large. What follows is not a debate. It is not a takedown. It is not comfort. It is the truth about what real intellectual honesty looks like, and a direct challenge to the way you have been thinking about the biggest question of your life. Before you can grasp what made his position on God so significant, you need to strip away every layer of mythology and meet the actual man, not the legend, not the caricature that gets passed around in physics classrooms and Reddit threads. The man behind all of it, because the man is the whole point. Richard Feynman was born in Far Rockaway, New York, in 1918. From the time he was a child, he had an unusual relationship with knowledge. Most children are taught that knowledge is something you receive, from teachers, from books, from authority. He operated differently. He needed to know why. Not because someone told him something was true, but because he had tested it, turned it over, examined it from every angle, and arrived at the answer himself. His father, a working-class man with no scientific training, is largely responsible for this. He taught his son early that a thing only truly belongs to you when you understand it from the inside. Names are not knowledge. Labels are not understanding. Titles are not wisdom. Only the thing itself, seen clearly, counts. Feynman carried that lesson into every room he ever entered for the rest of his life. By his mid-20s, he was working at Los Alamos on the project that would end World War II. Surrounded by the greatest scientific minds of the 20th century, he was still the one people watched. Not because he was the oldest or the most decorated, but because he thought differently. He cracked safes. He argued with Hans Bethe. He played bongo drums at 3 in the morning and then solved quantum field theory before breakfast. He was, by every account, completely and totally himself in a world where almost everyone else was performing. Later, his work on quantum electrodynamics would earn him the Nobel Prize. But the moment that perhaps defines him best came near the end of his life, when he sat before a commission investigating the Challenger space shuttle disaster. While officials deflected and committees stalled, he dipped a piece of O-ring material into a glass of ice water, held it up for the cameras, and demonstrated in real time exactly why 7 people had died. No speeches, no politics, just the truth, delivered without decoration. This is the man whose view on God you are about to hear. Keep that in mind, because when a man like this speaks about belief, he is not performing. He never performed. That was the whole point. Here is the first thing that is going to hit you hard if you're honest enough to let it land. Science does not disprove God. Not even close. And if you've been walking around believing that it does, you've been sold a lie dressed up as sophistication. Science is the most powerful tool human beings have ever developed for understanding the mechanics of the physical world. It tells you how stars are formed. It tells you how cells divide. It tells you how particles behave at speeds and scales that defy every intuition your brain evolved to have. It is breathtaking in its precision and almost limitless in its reach. But there is a wall. And on the other side of that wall is a question that science, by its very structure and methodology, is not equipped to answer. Why is there something rather than nothing? Not how did the universe begin? How is a scientific question, and science is doing extraordinary work on it. But why? Why existence itself? Why consciousness? Why the particular constants of physics are tuned so precisely that if any one of them shifted by an almost infinitesimal degree, no atoms would form, no stars would burn, no life would stir? That is not a question the scientific method answers. It can describe the fact, it cannot reach behind the fact. Feynman understood this better than most. He never pretended the tools of physics could do what they cannot do. He was a man who believed fiercely in intellectual honesty, and intellectual honesty required him to acknowledge the limits of his own discipline. The universe is far stranger than either the religious tradition or the materialist tradition tends to allow. The equations that describe it are hauntingly beautiful and point toward depths that neither theology nor physics has yet fully mapped. When you wave your hand and say science disproved all of that, you are not being scientific. You are being lazy in the clothing of reason. The people who handed you this certainty did not give it to you because the evidence demanded it. They gave it to you because certainty is easier to market than complexity. It builds communities. It creates identity. It feels like intelligence. But it is not intelligence. Intelligence is knowing what you don't know and having the guts to say so out loud. When the question was put to him directly, "Do you believe in God?" Feynman did not deflect. He did not perform humility. He did not say something vague designed to please everyone in the room. He thought carefully, spoke precisely, and gave the only answer that his commitment to honesty would permit. He said he was not able to believe in the conventional religious conception of a God who listens to prayers, who intervenes in human events, who rewards the good and punishes the wicked. That particular narrative, personal, interventionist, morally administrative, struck him as something that could not be verified and was, on the available evidence, unlikely. He was not cruel about it. He was not contemptuous. He simply could not pretend to hold a belief he did not hold, and he saw no virtue in that kind of pretending. But here is where most people who quote Feynman stop. And stopping there is a mistake. Because he did not stop at rejecting the personal God. He went further. He said explicitly that he could not claim certainty about what lies beyond the reach of human knowledge. The question of whether there is some deeper order, some intelligence or principle underlying the structure of the universe, some reason why the laws of physics are what they are, rather than something else entirely. That question, he said, was genuinely open, and he refused to close it. He refused to wear the badge of atheism the same way he refused to wear the badge of religion, because both badges required him to claim knowledge he did not possess. He called himself, in essence, agnostic, but not the soft, evasive agnosticism of someone who hasn't thought hard enough to have a view. The fierce agnosticism of someone who has thought harder than almost anyone and concluded that honest uncertainty is the only intellectually defensible position. It was not a retreat. It was an advance. It required more courage, more rigor, and more self-awareness than any definitive answer in either direction. You need to sit with that. Because what he was describing is not comfortable. It offers you no tribe. It offers you no applause. It offers you nothing except the raw, clean feeling of actually being honest and the knowledge that you are engaging with the question as it actually is, rather than as your preferred crowd wants it to be. That is a harder place to stand than you think. Most people never stand there even once in their lives. You want to know what is actually keeping your mind small, your thinking shallow, and your understanding of the world frozen at the level it was when you were 19 years old? It is not ignorance. It is certainty. Certainty is the most seductive enemy of real thought. It feels like strength. It presents itself as confidence. It wraps itself in the language of clarity and conviction, and people around you reward it, because certainty is socially useful. It signals membership. It signals loyalty. It tells your tribe that you are one of them, that you have not been contaminated by doubt, that you can be trusted to hold the line. And so your brain, which is exquisitely calibrated for social survival, learns to produce certainty on demand. Not because the evidence demands it, because the social environment rewards it. Feynman diagnosed this pathology with surgical precision. He wrote about it. He talked about it in lectures. He said that one of the most important things a scientist or any thinking person can do is maintain the ability to doubt. Not to doubt everything randomly or to become paralyzed by relativism, but to hold even your most cherished beliefs at arm's length, to be willing to examine them under the same unsparing light you would apply to someone else's beliefs, and to be genuinely open to the possibility that you are wrong. He called this living with uncertainty. And he said most people are incapable of it. Ask yourself honestly, when did you last seriously examine a belief that you publicly defend? Not to knock it down for sport, but to actually test it, to look for its weakest points, to steelman the opposing view, to genuinely ask whether you hold this position because the evidence led you there or because your environment handed it to you and you accepted it without inspection. If that exercise feels threatening, that feeling is diagnostic. It tells you exactly where your thinking has stopped and your performance has begun. The world is full of people who are certain. They are certain on every side of every question. They shout their certainty into cameras and comment sections and dinner conversations, and almost none of them have done the actual work that would entitle them to that certainty. They have consumed, they have absorbed, they have repeated, but they have not thought, not the way Feynman meant thinking, which requires you to risk being wrong in a very personal and uncomfortable way. Your certainty is not your strength. It is the wall you built to keep real thinking out. And until you are willing to examine that wall, you are not thinking, you are just decorating. There is something about Feynman that his critics in the religious world consistently miss, and something about him that his admirers in the secular world tend to flatten out of existence. He was not a cold man. He was not a reductionist in the sterile, joyless sense that word sometimes implies. He did not look at the universe and see a machine. He looked at it and felt something that, if it were described in any other context, you would call reverence. He talked about flowers. He said that when a scientist looks at a flower, they do not see less than what the artist sees, they see more. The beauty that strikes the eye is real, and it is there, but underneath it is the biology of photosynthesis, the chemistry of pigmentation, the evolutionary history of the relationship between this flower and the insects that pollinate it, the atomic structure of every petal trembling in the light. The understanding does not diminish the wonder, it multiplies it. It opens level after level of astonishment that the untrained eye never reaches. He was describing something sacred. He just refused to use that word, because the word had been claimed by institutions he could not follow. Think about what you do when you encounter something genuinely beautiful, a piece of music that stops you in the middle of a room, a view from a mountain that makes all your problems feel temporarily weightless, a moment with another human being so real and so present that time seems to pause. Where do you put that experience? What do you do with the fact that you, a creature made of carbon and water and electrical signals, can be moved to something approaching awe by the sheer fact of existence? Most people on both sides of the God debate fumble this question. The religious tradition names it and sometimes explains it too quickly, packaging the mystery into doctrine before you've had a chance to actually feel its full weight. The hard materialist dismisses it, reduces it to neurotransmitters and evolutionary fitness, which is accurate as far as it goes, but leaves out something important about the quality of the experience itself. Feynman sat in the question. He let the awe be what it was, without immediately reaching for a label. He said that not knowing, genuinely not knowing, is far more interesting than a false answer. He found beauty in the uncertainty itself. That is not emptiness. That is a kind of spiritual maturity that most traditions, ironically, spend centuries trying to teach. You do not need permission to find the universe astonishing. You only need the honesty to stop explaining it away. This one is going to sting. Sit with it before you reject it, because the rejection instinct is exactly the problem being described. The majority of people who are religious and the majority of people who are militantly atheist are doing the exact same thing with their belief systems. They are using them as social infrastructure, as armor, as a way of outsourcing the hardest questions to a community so they never have to sit alone with genuine uncertainty. The religious person who says it is God's will every time something inexplicable and painful happens is not engaging with reality. They are managing it. They are using a frame to stop the question before it becomes unbearable. There is something human in that. The need to make meaning is not a weakness. It is woven into the architecture of consciousness. But when the frame becomes a refusal to look at things as they are, it has crossed the line from faith into avoidance. Now look at the mirror image. The person who says it is all just atoms and chemicals. Consciousness is an illusion. Meaning is a story we tell ourselves. That person often believes they are being more honest, braver, more willing to face the hard truth. But examine it closely. There is a pride in that position, a social reward. There is a tribe of people who will applaud you for it. And very often, the position is held with just as little genuine examination as the faith it is meant to replace. It has become an identity, a brand, a membership card. Both positions, in their unreflective forms, are ways of running, in opposite directions, toward the same destination. The relief of not having to sit with an open question. Feynman saw both escapes clearly and had no patience for either. He once said, in what has become one of the most quoted things he ever uttered, that the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. That statement is aimed at everyone. The believer who stops questioning because the answers are too threatening. The skeptic who stops questioning because their skepticism has itself become unexamined dogma. The scientist who assumes the methods of their discipline exhaust all possible ways of knowing. You are fooling yourself right now, in some direction, about some set of beliefs. The only serious question is whether you are willing to find out which ones. Because the cost of not finding out is a mind that never really opens. Brilliant on the surface, locked shut underneath. Everything discussed until now has been building toward a single shift. Not a conclusion. Not a new set of answers to replace the old ones. A shift in the way you approach the act of thinking itself. Most people treat thinking as a process of defending territory. You have a set of beliefs, Something comes along that challenges them. Your mind mobilizes to repel the threat, finds the flaws in the opposing argument, marshals evidence for your existing position, discredits the source, and reports back that the territory is secure. You feel like you've thought. You have not thought. You have performed loyalty to a conclusion you already held. Real thinking does the opposite. It begins by surrendering the territory. Feynman's intellectual method was built on a willingness to be wrong, not the performance of humility, the actual appetite for it. He wanted to be wrong because being wrong meant there was something new to learn. He said that it is better to have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. That single sentence contains an entire philosophy of mind that most people will spend their whole lives never putting into practice. The mindset shift is this: stop chasing answers and start deepening your questions. Not because answers don't matter, but because the quality of your question determines the quality of the thinking you do on the way to the answer. A bad question produces a quick, comfortable, useless answer. A good question, a genuinely difficult, genuinely open, genuinely honest question, produces a journey. And on that journey, if you stay honest, you will encounter things about the universe and about yourself that no prepackaged answer ever gave you access to. Apply this to the question of God. Instead of asking, does God exist, yes or no, ask, what do I actually mean by that word? What kind of universe would a God imply? What would evidence for or against such a thing even look like? What is the difference between a universe with ultimate purpose and a universe without it? And how would I know which one I'm living in? These are harder questions. They are slower questions. They will not get you to a comfortable conclusion by the end of this video, but they will make you more honest, more alive, more genuinely in contact with reality than you were before you started. That is the Feynman standard. It asks more of you than any ideology ever has. It offers you less comfort, and it gives you something neither religion nor militant atheism can ever hand you: the actual experience of your own mind at work, fully and without flinching. None of this is abstract. None of it lives in the rarefied world of physics departments and Nobel lectures. Every single thing described in the previous 8 minutes has a direct, concrete application to how you go through an ordinary Tuesday. The conversations you have, the content you consume, the beliefs you broadcast, and the thoughts you allow yourself to actually finish. Every time you encounter a piece of information that confirms what you already believe and you share it without examining it, that is the opposite of what is being described here. Every time you dismiss an argument not because you've engaged with it, but because you've identified its source as belonging to the wrong team, that is the opposite. Every time you silence a genuine question inside yourself because pursuing it might take you somewhere socially inconvenient, that is the opposite. These are not small lapses. They are the accumulated weight of a mind that has stopped growing. And here is the part that should disturb you. You are doing all of this while believing you are a thoughtful person. That is what makes it dangerous. Feynman was not more intelligent than you in any way that matters for this conversation. His raw processing power was extraordinary, but that is not the point. The point is what he chose to do with his mind. He chose discomfort over certainty. He chose the open question over the closed answer. He chose to be genuinely wrong in public rather than safely correct in private. And he made that choice consistently over decades, in the face of professional pressure and social friction and the natural human hunger for belonging. You have that same capacity. Every human being does. The machinery is there. What is missing for most people is not intelligence. It is the decision to use that intelligence honestly rather than defensively. And that decision is not a talent. It is not a gift. It is a daily, effortful, uncomfortable choice made in the moment when you feel the urge to dismiss, to deflect, to retreat to your comfortable corner and let the hard question dissolve unanswered. This is what an extraordinary life of the mind actually looks like from the inside. Not genius arriving in flashes, not answers descending from above. A practice, a discipline, a kind of intellectual honesty that is frankly exhausting and absolutely indispensable because without it you are not thinking. You are dreaming with your eyes open, mistaking your comfort zone for the world. The world is larger than your current map of it. The question is whether you are willing to walk past the edges or whether you will spend the rest of your life redrawing the same familiar territory and calling it exploration. Here is your assignment, not a suggestion. An assignment because suggestions are for people who are comfortable, and comfort is not what brought you this far into this conversation. Find one belief, one single belief that you hold about God, about science, about consciousness, about meaning, about your own identity that you have never seriously examined. Not a belief you've defended, not a belief you've repeated, a belief you have genuinely tested from the inside with real willingness to be changed by what you find. If you can find even one that you've given that treatment, you are ahead of most people on this planet. If you cannot find one, if every belief you hold has been tested with that level of honesty, then you are either extraordinarily rare or you are not being honest with yourself. And at this point in this conversation, you should know which one it is. Now question it, not to destroy it. Destruction for its own sake is as lazy as uncritical acceptance. Question it in order to know it. Question it the way a surgeon approaches a body, with precision, with care, with the understanding that the point is not to wound but to see clearly. Ask where it came from. Ask what evidence would have to exist to change it. Ask whether you would hold it if you'd been born in a different family, a different culture, a different century. Ask whether the people you most respect hold it for reasons you could actually defend, or whether they hold it for the same unexamined reasons you do. Feynman did not believe in the conventional God. He also did not believe in the comfortable certainty of the atheist who mistakes ignorance of the question for an answer. He believed in the act of honest inquiry, and he paid the social price for that belief every day of his life. He was criticized by the religious for his skepticism. He was sometimes criticized by the secular world for refusing to be a clean, simple mascot for materialism. He accepted both criticisms without modification, because the alternative, shaping his intellectual positions to satisfy an audience, was the one thing he could never do. That is the standard. Not having the right answer. Having the courage to never stop asking the right questions, even when the questions make you unpopular, even when they make you uncomfortable, even when they reveal that the map you've been living by is missing entire continents. Subscribe if you want to be challenged, not validated. Like this video if it made you genuinely uncomfortable, rather than simply confirmed what you already believed. Share it with someone who will disagree with it, not someone who will nod along. And in the comments, write the one belief you have decided to actually examine. Not argue about, not defend, but examine. Say it out loud. The act of naming it in public is the first real commitment to thinking it through. Feynman spent his entire life looking at the universe exactly as it is, without decoration, without the comfort of a predetermined answer, without the permission of any authority. The least you can do for yourself, for the quality of the one mind you were given, is look at your own beliefs with the same unflinching honesty. That is not optional. That is the price of taking your own thinking seriously, and the clock on that decision is running right now.